Hello and welcome to my dental hygiene school experience. My name is Dak Ska, and each episode I'm going to share my own experience of dental hygiene school, the highs, the lows, the funny, and the real. Thank you for joining me on my journey, and here's another episode right now. What's up, dental nerds? It is Dak Ska here, and I have dropped the ball. I completely forgot that yesterday was Thursday, and I had no episode out for this morning, so I am doing this real quick before I start on my microbiology homework. Anyway, glad you could still join me. So it's been an eventful week this past week, so I'm just going to get right into it. So first of all, I always like to update on the parking situation. And so on Monday when I went to school, there was no parking, and I found street parking. And so it says only 2-hour parking. I think I probably parked there about maybe 3 or 4 hours later. But I had parked next to this green Jeep. And, it was a green color, so it stood out to me. Bright green, like lime green. So 3 or 4 hours later, when I went to go move my car, it was still there. And they didn't have a ticket on their dashboard or on their windshield. And it kind of gives me the impression that the street isn't monitored very closely. But then later on, on a different day when I went to go parking, I saw that green Jeep there and I parked next to them again. But when I came back to move my car, they weren't there. So I don't know if that one day they just lost track of time or what, but no tickets so far. So, that's what I'm really going for. Anyway, I wanted to share an idea that I'm very excited about. 2 years, everyone says it's going to go by so fast and it's going to be one big blur. And I thought, what's one day that I can remember this? And part of why I'm doing this podcast is to reminisce about the good old days or however I'll look back on it. But I came up with the idea of doing a yearbook, and I'm very excited about this. So I want to do one yearbook for the whole 2 years. And I talked to the school about it, and they said they don't do a yearbook, but we're welcome to do it. We have some guidelines, which I think are pretty reasonable. And we'll just need to get permission from corporate on using their logo on in our book. So still working on that, but I have so many ideas, and I told people about it, and they seem into it. Now, I may end up doing most of the work because I don't know how much I can delegate, and I also kind of feel bad delegating, since it was my idea. But I did tell people, you need to start taking pictures. We need to start uploading them somewhere so we can have a central location. But I don't know. We'll see how that all turns out. I'm trying to find the best way to put the pictures together, something that's very easy because I don't want this to take up a whole lot of time. I just want to be able to work on it here and there. But it'll be such a wonderful gift at the end of the program when we all look back and we have this book of memories and something to, like with high school, how you did that. Anyway, so that's something I'm constantly thinking about in the back of my mind, and I'm always writing down ideas as I think of them. So we had our midterm for Intro to Dental Hygiene. This one, I wasn't really sure how to study for it because some of the information I already knew because I'm in dental. But, I don't know. It just seemed like it wasn't like my other classes where it's like, okay, this is a new concept you have to wrap your mind around. I think for me it was a lot of refresher, but I didn't know how to study, so probably didn't do the best at studying. That's the best I can put it. But I'm glad I looked over my notes and stuff. It was good to be refreshed. So I took the test. I felt like it did fairly good, and well, I did. I passed, that's what I'm really going for in all my classes is that I'm passing. I'm not trying to be top of the class or anything like that. I'm not that kind of student. And I feel like trying to be top of the class is also very competitive, which I try not to be like that. But there was one question on the exam where I got it wrong, but it's because of the way the question was worded. It was talking about how I forget how it was worded, but basically how dangerous is it for you to be in a dental office, considering exposure to potentially harmful materials, mainly stuff with disease or bacteria, something like that. And so the options were like low, medium, high, but then there's also undetermined. And I thought the way the question was worded, it made me think like, oh, I just got stuck with the needle. Um, I may contract a disease from this. Like that's where my mind went. So I considered undetermined because we don't know the history of the patient. Well, we do know the history of the patient, but we don't know. Like, suppose they do have some bloodborne pathogen in their system. Just because they have it doesn't mean that I'm going to get it. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So I explained that to the teacher. She didn't really say much. I just said, and I didn't push too hard, but I just said, here's my stance. When you're grading it, maybe think about it, maybe think about what I said, just leaving that there. So when I went to go check my grade later, it was slightly higher than I anticipated. So I feel like she gave that one to me. Once we are done with our exams, we're not allowed to get them back. So I won't really know for sure. But based on going through the answers after, that one question I feel like I got, even though it was not the answer originally, what the teacher intended to be the right answer. And I'm also looking forward to next week for that same class because we'll have some seniors. Well, I guess they're not seniors, but they're in the class in front of us, ahead of us, however you want to phrase it. And they're going to talk to my class about student leadership. So that'll be interesting. I kind of got to see some notes early. And I'll let you know about it later. And then we had a good A&P class. I know that class has been kind of a struggle for a lot of us, but for some reason, everyone seemed pretty engaged. Our teacher was asking questions and people were answering. So, and then our teacher also said that we need to come to class with questions to be asked during class. And there was one question where I asked where the instructor didn't know the answer. It's kind of hard to explain. It's to do with neurons and all that stuff, so I won't explain that. But she wasn't sure, but she said it was a really good question, so I kind of felt like, oh, good, I'm thinking of good questions to ask. Yeah, so that was pretty exciting. Anyway, I'm going to take a break right here, and then I'll continue on with more stuff. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? It's actually quite easy. When I started this podcast, I started it on a whim. And as a dental hygiene student, I don't have time to waste figuring out how things work. I'm literally recording the podcast between doing my homework and studying for the next quiz or exam. Anchor has made it so easy for me to do this podcast. I can spend more time focusing on making episodes rather than figuring out how to get my podcast distributed to other platforms. Anchor has all the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. I've even used it to interview my guests. They're not even in the same room as me, and yet the quality is still top-notch. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. All right, welcome back from break. So, on Tuesday is my study day, and I have no classes that day, so I stay home. I try and study, well, not practice studying, but I actually study. And because the next day we had our microbiology exam, we did a study hall online, and we spent probably about 6 or 7 hours in study hall. It was very helpful, but very intense. It kind of gave me a boost of confidence because I realized there's some things that I do know, which is encouraging because with microbiology, I think I've said this before, it seems like someone's trying to teach me a foreign language and I'm completely lost in all of that. But I'm focusing on my homework and all the things that will get my grade up. Um, so, anyway, with all the studying that we did, I was doing this in hopes that it won't be as difficult as I was expecting. So, our exam started at 8 a.m., and I had to travel 2 hours. So, I tried to leave about 6 a.m., and honestly, traffic was more than I was expecting. It's interesting because I'm used to going later in the day, so I'm trying to arrive around 9:30 or 10:30. And so when the traffic stops, when people get bunched up, it actually stopped in different places. So it was actually a lot sooner. And yeah, so I actually only arrived probably about 15 minutes before the exam started, which I was aiming for possibly arriving around 7:30, so that would give me 30 minutes. And I didn't get a chance to study before we started the exam. I was hoping to at least study to get my mind in that space. We kind of just jumped right into it, so that's not something that's not how I wanted to do it, but whatever. So we started the exam, and it was on the computer, and we were given a calculator for there was maybe one or two questions where we had to do some calculations. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's just going through some of the questions. Some of them I just was so lost on them. Now, let me emphasize, I did know some questions. Going through, I knew the answer right away. So that was encouraging to me. It wasn't a total loss. I definitely guessed on some of them. And then, like I said, there were some questions where I had no idea what they were even asking. I I couldn't even tell you to save my life which was the right answer. There was one question that required the use of a formula, and like I said, they gave us a calculator. I remember there was a formula we were given in class beforehand, and so I somewhat memorized the formula. But when I was using the formula in the exam, it didn't really make sense to me how to figure out the answer because the way we calculated the formula in class, we were trying to figure out a different part in the exam. And so, kind of working backwards, the numbers weren't quite adding up. But I was able to find a way where it was kind of a manual process to figure out the answer, but I got the right answer. So, 6 hours was the answer. Doesn't matter what the question is, I guess, at this point. um, so, like I said, it was on the computer. I reviewed all the questions at the end, like I normally do. And so you submit that, and it says, do you want to go back and see your answers? See if you got them right or wrong. So it doesn't say it doesn't say what your total grade was. So I kind of had to go through and add up all the right answers. But it does tell you which ones you got right and which ones you got wrong. And I feel like I did okay. It was really up in the air, though, how I felt like I was doing. Really wasn't sure. But because I was able to add up my answers, I was able to find out my grade. And now keep in mind the passing grade is 77%. I think only one person in our class actually passed. Not everyone checked their answers, though. Not everyone saw that section. But I'm not going to dwell on it too much. Many other people have failed the midterm and passed the class before. So I'm going to focus on that. Like I said, I was going to focus on my assignments because that's where I have a real opportunity to get the highest grade possible based on what we are given. And that's kind of how life works. Okay, and something else I thought about recently. This is not related to microbiology anymore. This is just me sharing my thoughts. But something else I thought about recently is that I am capable of learning. In the past 6 weeks, I have learned so much, and there are varying degrees of learning in different areas. Now, before I started school, I was doing a lot of research on how to study and how to take tests, and I learned about the concept of neuroplasticity. And generally, vaguely, it means that our brain is able to change and learn new things. And even our A&P instructor was saying in a class not too long ago that there's no known limit on how much information can be stored in the human brain. That's kind of exciting to me. I've noticed that I know things that I wasn't even aware of before school started. I want to use this motivation to help me continue on my journey. I'm so excited for how far I've come, even though I've just scratched the surface. After that after microbiology, we had our A&P class, and because I woke up so early, I was feeling a little tired. But class wasn't too bad. It was harder to concentrate though. And then after that, we had our dental anatomy class. Now, I had been stressing out about this microbiology exam, and pretty much almost every class in dental anatomy, we will have a quiz. I didn't really study a whole lot for the quiz because I knew that it wasn't worth as much for my grade, and I wanted to focus on microbiology. By this point of the day, my mental energy was spent. It's always starting to get warm. Well, it's also starting to get warm outside, and we have. It's also starting to get warm outside, and we have class apparently in the only room in the building without an air conditioner. We went through so many lecture slides. Let me start over. It's also starting to get warm outside, and we have class in apparently the room in the building without air conditioning. The only room. We went through so many lecture slides, and at one point the instructor even said, "Okay, it's late in the afternoon, it's hot in here, some of you are falling asleep, but let's get through these last final slides." And it's true, there was someone that was kind of falling asleep, but I don't blame them. It was quite warm in there. We were all struggling. But you know what gets you perked up after a long day? Going out for dinner and drinks. We decided that after the day that we had, that we all deserved it. And so a few of us, I think there was probably about 9 of us out of 20, that were able to go to a restaurant and enjoy a drink and have some tacos. I had a quesadilla because I like all that cheese. And we're students. We don't have money right now, so we just had a very modest dinner, I guess you could say. And we had a great time. It was so good to hang out with everyone outside of school. So, something that I wanted to mention was that, I have a question for everyone in my audience. I am 6 weeks in for school. I haven't mentioned this podcast to my classmates yet. I will tell them at some point, but my question to you is, to my listeners, is it time I tell them about the podcast? I'll post the question on Instagram and on Spotify, and I would love to hear from you. And your input will be valuable, because if you say, no, don't do it, I'll wait. But I kind of want to tell them. But I'll leave it up to the audience. And I also just want to say thank you, everyone, for listening. I really appreciate everyone who has been following me and is listening to all my podcasts. It really does mean a lot, and I think that going forward, there will be much success in this podcast, and I'm not saying necessarily a lot of followers or anything like that, but I do want to say that just the faithful following of the people I do have means a lot. Anyway, that is week 6, and thank you so much for being here, and I will post this right now, and everyone have a great week. Great week.